Great. We're recording this conversation. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Inglorious Pastords. I'm your host, Bruce Martin, and our co-host, Roger Edward Martin.
When did I become the co-host?
I just thought I would take charge today. I thought this would be my time to jump in and
my little brother always has to be in charge. Okay, you get to be the host.
Well, as the executor of Mom and Dad's estate, I get to do pretty much anything I want now. So I'm making all decisions for family from this point forward.
So much sense. Yes, since Mom and Dad gave you the keys to the kingdom, you have been in ruler mode.
Incorrigible. There's lots of words we could use right now. Well, we're glad to have you back. In case you didn't know, I think there's two teams tied atop the AFC right now, Raj, in the NFL.
Yes, there are.
And Denver's the number 1 seed and Patriots are the number 2 seed.
Identical records, but you have the tiebreak, yes.
That is so exciting. This is going to get really ugly when we get to playoff. You know, it could work out in the playoffs where we never have to go head to head. Like if one of us loses.
Right. If one of us loses early, yes, saves that little problem. We could.
I will say our last 4 games are brutal. Like all winning records, some of them leading their division. Should be interesting. Where I think you're playing 2 and 12 teams for the rest.
No, we play Buffalo next, then the Ravens. Then the Dolphins, both of which Ravens, Dolphins, both 6 and 7.
Okay, well, and Buffalo they're back on track. It seems like they're winning
9-4, and so this week's a big week. I also saw another fascinating stat where Denver and New England are tied.
Oh my gosh!
Well,
do tell.
No, I'm going to tell you. This is what's interesting. This is a bigger picture one down through the years.
Okay.
And I'm curious how you feel about this. The Patriots and the Broncos are tied for the most Super Bowl losses.
Really? I would have never thought the Patriots had that many losses.
I had no idea. The Patriots.
I knew the 1985 Bears game was a debacle.
And then we lost to 1997 Green Bay Packers. Okay. This was before the Belichick era.
Yeah.
Then we lost 3 in the Belichick era, 1-6, lost 3.
Went to 9.
What's that?
I went to 9 Super Bowls in that era. That's nuts.
Right. So the Pats have been to 11, which is the most in the league. But I had no idea. Denver and the Patriots are tied for the most losses. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's a little bit like, in golf, when you look at Jack Nicklaus has the most, wins, in the majors of all times. But what's staggering is his number of seconds.
Seconds, right.
I mean, so he was always right there. It tells you that over the years, Denver and the Patriots have been a big part of AFC championships and Super Bowls.
Well, I looked it up. Only 13 teams have gone to 5 Super Bowls or more.
Okay.
So, and then there are 4 teams that have never actually been to a Super Bowl. You think they'd love to have a few Super Bowl losses?
Oh, yeah. Just the chance to get there would be huge.
So anyway, I just thought that was I came across that randomly this week. But
and I did see where Tennessee would be playing Notre Dame in the Tidy Bowl. Oh, no. Sorry, Notre Dame opted out of the bowl game. My bad.
Oh, my.
What do we do with snubs? I'm like, okay, this is all I can say to Notre Dame fans. Get into some kind of conference, okay? You get to set your own schedule. You get to pick the teams you play. I can't help it if you start with 2 losses and then don't make the playoffs. That's all I can say.
Well, the other thing that's sort of mixed in all of this, which is very, very interesting, is just where NIL and NFL money, you got more and more players that are opting out of playoffs, period.
Right.
Or bowl games.
Yep.
They might go to a bowl game if they're in the playoffs, but one of the factors that came even to Notre Dame's decision was, when I was looking at it, was like a number of their NFL people are going to go to NFL didn't want to take a chance. So now we're not really playing for anything in a bowl game. So they were already going to have a skeleton team, and the rest of the team said, we don't want to play with a team that doesn't resemble the team we had all year.
It is interesting. No, I didn't read that.
Isn't that? Yeah. So I thought,
and that is the thing about, when you think about player health, you got college kids that are wanting to go NFL. They're like, I cannot risk breaking a leg in a meaningless bowl game.
Right. So anyway, it's just another one of those ways that
there's all these, in life, there's all these unintended consequences, decisions that are made that then it's like a domino effect. All these other decisions then follow that weren't intended. It's sort of collateral damage from a singular decision that might have actually been made for a good reason.
Yep.
But then you get these unintended consequences. So, yeehaw. Well, Rod, show everyone the shirt that you're wearing today. Can you see it, people? It's Pink Floyd. Okay, Bruce has brought us back to Pink Floyd. I know we did that earlier on one of our seasons. I mean, we're in we're in season 20 now. I don't know how we managed that in 4 years.
I wonder if we should now call our podcast Music and Football.
Music and Football. Well, you know what I wondered is, I want to go back. You should probably go. You probably have a better record of it. I'm wondering what episode, how many total podcasts have we done? Is this
I have no idea.
Our 200th podcast? Because if it is,
I should look it up. That would be fun to know.
We should do something special, like give away a laptop.
Or even look back to the date, our very first podcast, to know the anniversary date would be interesting.
Okay, we've got some work to do before next week.
Well, and if we're going to be giving away anything, we still need that sponsor.
Well, and I do have, the laptop will be an Acer from 1996, which still works. It's got Windows 3 with the little window that crawls across like a fish.
No, those are selling big time on eBay now as
retro computers.
Well, now we're talking, they're so ancient. It is funny, like some of the old, like an old Mac computer, different some of the old computer, like some of those are selling for thousands.
Oh, wouldn't I love to have a Tandy 1000 right now?
Right. If you had one new in box or whatever, some of those from the earliest days.
Yeah.
They're actually worth a lot.
You have to think about what's the mindset of the person that buys that and says, in 40 years, I think this will be worth something. So I'm going to keep it in the box.
Right.
It was their whole retirement plan, I guess. I don't know.
Right. And it's funny. People have those ideas about that. If you did it with some computers, great. If you did it with Beanie Babies, sucks to be you.
So what about a Cabbage Patch doll? Are those big?
No, they are not.
Barbie?
Some of these ones that people thought this will be some of the earliest Barbies. Yes. If they're new in box, you can make some big money for the very earliest Barbies, you can make thousands. Yes.
So the Cabbage Patch Kids aren't bringing in any cabbage.
Nope. You're going to be eating cabbage.
Okay. So, all right. So I've got to be honest with our listeners. I had never heard this song until like last week, and it was funny. It just came up randomly. When I play a certain song on YouTube Music, which I use, it'll start running a playlist. And I had some Pink Floyd in there, but it played this song on the Turning Away. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, stop. Let me listen to that again. Because it is a major, what I would call social conscience kind of song. Yep. And I was shocked. I had no idea that, I know very little about the band anyway, but Pink Floyd in this song, the whole idea behind the song on the Turning Away is this idea of how easy it is in a culture to turn away from the first line of the song, the poor and the downtrodden, the weary, the left behind, and I'm like, and the more I listened to the song, of course, you and I love words. Yep. I thought lyrically, this is so well written.
No, I had never heard of the song till you said, hey, we're doing On the Turning Away. And it's interesting because, like, growing up, I was not a Pink Floyd.
Right.
Like, even the pop radio I would have listened to, like, Pink Floyd wasn't typically coming up.
Right.
And so, like, for me having this shirt, which is comical, I have this shirt only because it's listed on eBay. I'm selling it.
And that's why it still has the size tag running down.
That's why I didn't take that off, because it's still,
it makes it worth more.
It's for sale, and you, friends, could have it if you
call now at 1-800-PINK-FLOYD.
But what's interesting, Bruce, again, how often the songwriters end up being the prophets.
Yeah.
And voices to the conscience. You could think about That's Just the Way It Is by
yes, Bruce Hornsby.
Yes, thank you. But Bruce, there's another one we heard as a kid that parallels Pink Floyd's. It was a song by Elvis, In the Ghetto.
In the Ghetto. Yeah, we were very familiar with that song.
Well, listen, there's a point he said in that song, are we too blind to see, or do we simply turn our heads and look the other way? Well, the world turned away. And a young little boy with runny nose, the kid in the ghetto, but he uses the exact same language of turning away. The world turned away. There's a ghetto there in Chicago. By the way, I was born in Chicago, so that song struck me in a new way listening to that.
Oh yeah.
He's talking about a Chicago ghetto, but he talks about we turn and look the other way.
So yeah, and that is, of course, the whole theme of this song. I wanted to read just the first verse for our listeners, because they're probably not familiar with the song either. Right. And then I want to talk about what I think it parallels. So it starts out on the turning away from the pale and the downtrodden, and the words they say, which we won't understand. And I'm like, isn't that true? We live in different worlds. It's almost a different language. We live in different worlds.
Yep.
Don't accept what's happening is just a case of others suffering, or you'll find that you're joining in the turning away. And when I first heard the story that came to mind was the very familiar story of Jesus, of the Good Samaritan. He tells a very clear, sort of graphic story about a person that's been beat up, robbed, left to die on the side of the road. And religious people look at it, and he says, literally, they turn away. They move to the other side of the road. You talk about a turning away, and keep on going. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this song parallels that. And I realized, of course, I have to preach to myself on this. How often do I turn away? You see poverty or tragedy or trauma or difficulty, and there's something in us that's almost like there's a tension in us, a part of us that would like to help, but feels like I'm not sure exactly what to do. Or I just don't want to expend, for me, sometimes I don't want to expend the emotional energy right now to do that thing. Even like yesterday, driving by, there was a car on the side of the road that had a wheel jacked up, and I'm like, someone's got a tire problem. And there was no one at the car at that point. But I'm like, there's been times that I've driven by that and just turned away. Other times where I've stopped and said, hey, do you need any help? And part of it, when I thought about the podcast, I'm like, what is it in human nature that causes us to turn away? Is it the discomfort of knowing that other people don't have it as well as us? Is it almost like a little bit of a guilt that we feel about how well our life is going comparatively?
Well, but Pink Floyd ties it to something that I think Jesus ties it to. And relates to a different Jesus story that came to my mind this morning, totally randomly. But Pink Floyd addresses a heart that becomes more cold and like stone. He uses the image of stone. And there's this part that is, our hearts get sort of hard where he's actually getting it. Part of the turning away is because we join the ones who are turning away, and I guess we have to have a reason. Oh, you start, yeah.
Well, no, I'm just saying, so for listeners, verse 2 goes like this. It's a sin that somehow light is changing to shadow, casting its shroud over all that we've known, unaware how the ranks have grown, driven on by a heart of stone. We could find that we're all alone in the dream of the proud.
Dream of the proud. Yeah.
So there's this, he's talking about, we've become hard-hearted about it, but the ranks have grown. And in one sense, Roger, it seems to be is indicating, what is true is, if we're in the middle class or above, we're in the majority.
Yep.
So the ranks have grown, and it's almost like, and we see this happening in America right now, the rich are getting richer, like crazy rich. I was thinking yesterday, like one person's wealth could almost eliminate the national debt, the wealth of one person.
Right.
I'm just like, and then do I end up joining the ranks of just, hey, this is, I'm a middle-class guy. I'm okay. I'm good.
Well,
do I start getting that same heart of stone?
Well, and if wonder, there are different parts of that, like even Bruce Hornsby. Well, that's just the way it is.
That's just the way it is.
There's not really anything you can do about it. It's nobody's fault. But that's where we're less likely to say it's nobody's fault. We're more likely to say, I'll say me. So for the decades when I was turning away.
Yep.
I'm not fully there now. I'm not saying, but for the decades where Pink Floyd's song was about me, here's what I can say. I had a narrative about those people, the people holding the "We'll work for food" sign, the people begging, the people in the housing projects. I had a narrative, and my narrative was, I realized, it was irresponsibility, laziness, addiction.
Yeah.
My story, my reason.
In other words, it's their fault.
Right. My rationale for turning away is they've got a problem, not me. It's not my heart. It's not my problem. It's not my issue. They should get their act together. They are and I realized for nice people like us, particularly if we're Christian, when I say Christian, is like we're saying, I'm following the way of Jesus. For Christians to turn away, you have to have a narrative that allows you to do that.
Gives you permission.
In good conscience, as a follower of Jesus. And I realized for me, for years it was, I don't have a responsibility for the poor whose poverty is their fault. And that was 99% of the poor in my mind. Now, what has fundamentally changed is the last 13 years, I've lived in a neighborhood where I see homeless people every single day of my life.
Yep.
I see people, I know the names of my neighbors that are working multiple jobs and barely hanging on. They're at the edge of eviction. They're, and you start realizing what helped my narrative for so many years was I wasn't living next to.
I didn't know actual people.
Right. If I'm talking about the homeless and the poor, gosh, for so many years, I thought we were the poor. Family of 6 kids. We had to divide a hamburger at McDonald's. I thought we were poor. Had no idea. But I'll tell you this, Bruce, the story, I was not expecting this. I'm sitting on my porch this morning. And it's why this turning away is so sobering, because Jesus addresses it. I had the thought this morning, I'm not reading the Bible. I'm just hanging out with God. I'm giving thanks. I'm singing. Which I do every morning, sitting out on my front porch. And the phrase came to my mind, Lazarus was homeless. And I immediately thought, not Mary and Martha's Lazarus, the rich man and Lazarus story.
Yep.
And I felt God say, Lazarus was homeless. And suddenly the story I realized he's sitting at the gate. He's sitting outside. He doesn't have a place. He's sitting he's begging. He's scrounging for food. He's sick. Like so many of the homeless I know, there's disabilities, there's mental issues.
Yeah.
There are heart conditions. There are literally, I know homeless who've had bleeding sores on their feet. And then he dies. And the homeless, like I know so many homeless friends in the last 5 years, I know them by name. They've died because life on the street is cold and hard.
Yep.
So then God brought to mind what we never asked with this story. When I grew up with this story, because I think it's a story about turning away. That was the turning away story. When we heard this story in any sermon, it was a story about heaven or hell. This is what hell is like. This is what.
Yeah. It was not about the poor and the rich.
Now, so if that's the case, why is Lazarus in the story? Why? And Bruce. And this just came as a flood of things I've known, but it was almost like God was just, do you realize how often Jesus connected people who missed the kingdom were people who turned away?
Yeah.
People who missed the kingdom. In other words, it's a heart issue. People who did not have the heart of the king were people who looked away. There's this story. You had someone right outside your house and you looked away. Matthew 25, you looked away from people who didn't have enough clothing and didn't have food and were in prison. You looked away from immigrants. You looked away from the sick. And then there's the story of the rich ruler who comes to you. How do I enter the kingdom? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. This is wonderful. Sell everything you have, give to the poor, and
then come follow me.
And come follow me. And it says he turned away.
He turned away.
He turned away. God said, look at the poor. Look at the,
Oh, no, that's a great point that I've never thought about in that story. He says, I've always taught, that Jesus says, give to the poor. He didn't say take it to the temple and give it there. He said, I want you to go to the poor. I want you to give it to the poor. It's an interesting thing because you're going to have to see them. You have to interact with them on some level. But Roger, maybe the rich man was going, but they don't deserve it. I've worked so hard for all of my money, for all of my possessions, for everything that I have. Why would I give that to people? Because here's the other narrative that I realized is going on sometimes in my mind and sometimes in our culture, but it was this idea that God helps those who help themselves.
Oh, yes.
So
if think that's a scripture, that's a verse in the Bible.
Yeah, like cleanliness is next to godliness. That's right there in Hezariah 14:12.
Or heresy 4:12.
But I think I think it can be the subtle idea that I deserve what I have.
Yep.
Therefore, think about it. That person deserves what they have.
Right.
They must be, it goes back to the narrative. They must be doing something wrong because God helps those who help themselves.
They made their bed. So what am I doing? And here's the thing. And even then this idea, if I help them, I'm de-incentivizing. They already don't want to work. They're already lazy. Now if I give them something, I'm actually making it worse. So now the narrative is God wouldn't want me to give to that person in need because as a whole, that group doesn't want to work. They're not. And I mean, I realized how long I had that story that allowed me to look away. And Jesus, the other story, you remember Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus has the conversation with Jesus. He comes out and he says, if I've cheated anyone, and I have, I'm going to restore fourfold, and then I'm going to have half of what I have to the poor. And Jesus says, this is the son of Abraham. This guy's in the kingdom.
This guy's in the kingdom.
He finally saw the poor. He finally stopped turning away. And so just this sobering, to me, this turning away isn't just a Pink Floyd song or an Elvis song or a Bruce Hornsby. Jesus is saying this turning away, this fundamentally turning away from the least of these, the vulnerable, is a fundamental turning away from the heart of God. From
Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize, Roger, in this podcast, in this brief podcast, we've already mentioned 5 stories or parables, true stories of that is Jesus interacting with the poor and our relationship to the poor. In other words, it wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't every now and then Jesus would talk about probably ought to help the poor a little bit. I mean, this was a consistent teaching of Jesus. And I think, and it's probably where I'm going to go with my blog post next week. I did a blog post this week, which is about not turning away, particularly from immigrants and foreigners, and how do we treat the stranger. But I'm gonna expand on it because I got some interesting interactions with people, and I love that. I very much want thoughtful dialogue. But I'm gonna let them know, hey, I'm gonna do another blog post next week. But I'm gonna go then, because what I'm trying to drill down to is the heart of God, not just what Scripture says about this, but what's the heart of God. And I realize as you're talking, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a litany of stories that Jesus told about our relationship to the less fortunate, to the people that are outside, to the stranger, the alien, the foreigner, to the poor, to the home. And I'm like, it's a consistent theme. And so I want to keep getting to the heart of God, because you're right. Where I want to finish is there's 2 things. Number one, even if I see that person as a bad person, like they're wicked and I'm somehow better than them, what came to my mind this week is Jesus said, now your Father is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. And then he says, be perfect as your Father is perfect. In other words, he's not letting us off the hook. He said, no, God's kind to everybody, but you guys don't. He's saying, I want you to be like my Father, who's kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. And I realized, okay, number one, I'm in that group, the ungrateful and the wicked.
Yep.
But that, in other words, I don't have room to not love anybody. That's why even the loving your enemies teaching of Jesus is so important. Yep. There's no one that I can exclude from love. No one. It doesn't matter what they've done. Well, criminals, if they're criminals, they shouldn't be cared for. But weren't we all dead in our trespasses and sin? Well, Jesus demonstrated his love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died. I mean,
the fundamental idea, even if you think around, like, our fundamental call is mercy.
Yes.
Fundamental call there is mercy. Well, mercy is for people who break laws, who screw ups. In other words, mercy is at the very heart and core of the gospel. And mercy is only ever for sinners. It's for
right. You can't extend mercy to the righteous.
Right. I know. The point is, I want you now to be. So it's just the idea that somehow, and I realize this is part of we don't have to show mercy. It's a rationale that seems just bizarre now, but this idea that I don't have to show mercy to someone if it's their fault.
Right.
If they've blown,
if they sinned.
If they sinned, if it's their decision. And by the way, you think about how often we're turning poverty and those kind of things. It's sin. It's laziness. It's purely addiction. It's purely laziness.
And yet Pink Floyd points out that the sin is turning away, turning light into shadow. And it's interesting because he switches the narrative in the final verse.
You ought to read that last verse.
He says, no more turning away from the coldness inside.
Right.
He's talking about my heart. No more turning. This heart of stone has got to change.
Yep.
And I'm like, that. He referenced sin, which is just fascinating to me in verse 2, but then he turns it on, no more turning away. And he has this dream that we'll stop doing it.
And I think this might be if you realize, I think it highlights how deeply rooted shaming and blaming others so I can excuse myself, how deeply rooted, even if you go back to the very first sin, that is deeply rooted in shaming and blaming. I'm not responsible. I'm not responsible. She did it. I'm not responsible. He did it. I'm not responsible. It's the enemy. I'm not responsible. But to see that moving forward, this is that fundamental thing. I don't have to do something. And what it reveals is the hardness and coldness of my heart, because it's not the problem. The problem is me, and the only person who can change that ultimately is God. This is why we need Jesus. This is why we need Zacchaeus has this encounter with Jesus, and it fundamentally changes a mindset. He had been turning away for how many years of his life, and he meets Jesus.
And Roger, not just turning away, maybe even taking part in the oppression of the poor through taxation.
Oh, yes.
I mean, in other words, it wasn't just, it wasn't just like he's taxing the rich and making money. He's taxing across the board, although he might have given some rich friends a discount. Who knows? But it was that moment. I can't remember which prophet talks about this in the Old Testament, but it's the moment that God exchanged a heart of stone for a heart of flesh.
Mm.
I just love that. It's like, and you're right, only God can do that. In other words, this is not about, I feel guilty, therefore I'm going to do something. I'm going to give someone a $20 bill. This is something that God has to change in my heart, has to change in anyone's heart, for it not to be just an act of pity or a way of soothing my own sense of guilt.
No, we can actually get back into that earning mode. Oh, I'll fix it myself.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I've been turning away, so now I'll just suddenly no, actually, it's pointing to this is what the law, this is what, like, you can't do that. It's part of our fundamental brokenness that we actually think about the words of Isaiah. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. In other words,
returning again. Yes.
I'm about me. I'm turned my head for they've got their own life. I'm going to do my thing. It's this fundamental thing where a fundamental part of it is the turning away. And only God can save us from that. It's not that, try harder now, try to be a little better. It's like, this is what's fundamentally broken. And I think for any one of us, it's God. And for me, the convicting word even out of this is I can look and say, I live in a neighborhood. I'm surrounded by people all the time who are these people that Pink Floyd is referencing. But that doesn't mean that I still can't lose my heart.
Yeah.
And this is one of my constant prayers is, God, don't let me lose my heart. Don't let me. I've got to continue to have Jesus help my heart not turn away. Join the ranks of those who are turning away.
Join the ranks, the growing ranks, which is interesting. And he just talks about it's the ranks of the proud. And I'm like, there is a certain humility in and like you said, I'm all about me. Bruce I'm all about me too. And it's like, there's a humility that says, what does scripture say? Each person should not look only to his own needs, but to the needs of others.
Yes.
Scripture recognizes that we have a normal tendency to take care of ourselves, to take care of our needs.
Right.
Understandable. Scripture just says, don't limit it to that.
Right.
Don't stop there.
Self-interest is natural. Self first is not. Self preeminent. Self-interest is natural. Self first is not. That's what's broken. In fact, what God would say, what Jesus did say, the fundamental God first, and then you and your neighbor side by side.
Yeah.
God first, then you and your neighbor, rich, poor, homeless, sick, wealthy, whatever. You got So self-interest, not a problem. God preeminent, self-interest, but my interest for self matches my interest for others. Anyway, that's my.
No, that's really good. I was, like I said, I was surprised by the song because, again, I didn't know much about. I only knew Pink Floyd is a rock band out of the UK, and it was cool, and they were cool to listen. I liked a lot of their music, but this was one that I had never ever heard, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so. And like you said, it's the musician that becomes the prophet to the culture.
That song was written in 1987.
Okay.
I'm 87.
I'd been married like for 4 years.
I was 26 years old. It's interesting. I would certainly have been in a turning away season. I was not the homeless, the poor, the vulnerable, immigrants, the need. None of these people groups were on my radar.
I was about 2 years away from that. That's interesting, because I began following Jesus 1989. And that was the first time I can remember helping a lady. This was when we lived in Ringgold, Georgia, helping a lady buy a big grocery cart of groceries because she didn't have money for groceries, and taking her to the store and just like, but I had never even had that inclination until I began the journey of following Jesus. In other words, it's a whole other discussion. It's one thing to believe in Jesus, to know about Jesus, to believe in Jesus as a historical figure, as the Son of God, the 7 Bible facts about Jesus. It's another thing to follow, and actually do what Jesus says, because Jesus said the blessing is not for the person that hears my words, because Jesus has just said some profound things, and this woman calls out, "Blessed are you and the mother who nursed you," and he's like, it's sort of that great message, Pastor. That was a great talk. And Jesus didn't hesitate. He's like, well, the blessing's not for those that hear.
What are you going to do about it?
The blessing is for those that do. So, and of course, interesting. And that's the way he finishes it up. And that's the way we'll finish the podcast. He finishes the parable of the Good Samaritan. He said, now, which one showed compassion, mercy to the person on the side of the road? And he's like, yeah, I guess it was the one that helped him. And then Jesus says, go and do the same.
Right.
So again, no out. It's interesting, I think, and on topic, but I never thought about the rich man and Lazarus. But you're right; it was a destination story. It was never really around the rich in relation to the poor, or
no. We would
We would spend a lot of time talking about what is Hades.
No,
what is hell?
It was the whole
What's
story.
Abraham's bosom?
Right. Was the conversation between Abraham and the guy who missed the kingdom. The whole. Well, we just left Lazarus still at the gate. I mean, we didn't. He wasn't. We didn't. I think Jesus was pointing to.
Yeah.
Historically, this is maybe the marker, maybe the core for all the markers we loved to have of what indicate people who are missing the kingdom. It's the language they're using, or their clothing, or their music they're listening to, or their
darn tattoos and piercings,
or their sexual lifestyle. That's and the idea, even in the words of the prophet Ezekiel about Sodom was arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned for the poor. That's why they received the judgment of God. Like, that part got left out of the story just as much as Lazarus got left out of the story of the rich man and Lazarus.
And I have to credit Tim Keller with pointing this out. First person that I noted that pointed this out, but it stuck with me. It's the only parable that Jesus ever told where someone had a name. Lazarus, the poor. And do you know what that name means? God helps. It just reminded me, God's heart is for the poor. And when that's why Jesus said, when you welcome the stranger, when you give to the person who needs clothing, when you give to the person who needs food, he said, you're giving to me. Because that's the person that I help. And I'm like, that is such a good.
And I just thought, while you're saying that, and this is just very, I mean, even now, think about how often aid and help goes to people without ever learning their name.
Yeah.
So Jesus is saying the poor and the homeless have a name. How often have I given $20 or I've done this, or maybe I've served food in a line and I still never, maybe we're still missing something. If that Jesus is saying they have a name. The only story, only parable. Yeah.
And that Tim Keller pointing that out.
Yeah.
Forever changed the way that I interact with the poor, because now one of the first things I will ask is, well, tell me your name. I'm Bruce, because I know that they have a name. And it's that thing. I think part of my heart of stone was, okay, I might give to you, but I don't want to know the story.
Yes.
I don't care about
I don't want to get involved.
I don't want to get involved beyond the $20 that I have. But I realized Jesus, again, he's making, if he only in a parable ever gives a name to a person one time, that's significant. There's a reason for that.
And Bruce, I got to tell you, I was talking to Joy this morning. She had a fascinating observation. Her observation was, and now this is just listen and whatever God
this
speaks.
Is the Pastords' Wives podcast,
right? And whatever God wants to speak through it, she said it's interesting to me then that the wealthy man doesn't have a name. And she says, and for me, what I kind of felt with that was, well, that's every man. That could be me. That could be Roger. That could be. But Joy said, but I also think of those haunting words of Jesus, who said, I never knew you. She said, like the people who thought they were in the kingdom. And you think about even this now, all the people they
like, I don't know your name.
Because we were hard workers, we were using the spiritual gifts, we were volunteering big time, we were servers in the church, we were doing these kind of things, whatever. And her word, Joy's, but I don't even know you by name. I don't even know you. Anyway, just a sobering. Anyway,
and I was reminded again, and this will be my last thought on it, because in case you're wondering, well, I'm not really rich. I'll never forget the words of Andy Stanley. He's like, if you have ever gotten an Amazon package at your house and you're not sure what's in it, you're rich. And it happened to me this week. We got an Amazon package, and Marlena goes, what's that? And I'm like, I have no idea. And I realized that's something that the rich would say. I mean, we don't have to think about what we're buying. Like, will I make groceries this week? Will I make the electric bill this week? Will I make rent this week? Hey, I need this thing. I'm just going to buy it.
Right. If you've gone to the grocery store and not checked the receipt number.
Yeah.
At the end of you made the buy and you never even look at what the actual number is.
You're rich.
Right.
We're going to give you, maybe we should devote an entire podcast to 100 ways that you know that you're rich, because that's another good one. Because I realize now my wife does that just because she's a fact checker. She's wired like that. You know, she wants to see what the dollar, I'm like, I don't look at it.
But the word here is not, again, because I'm rich. I know I am. I'm wealthy. Yeah. I am. So it's not like Jesus, oh, that's bad.
No, right.
But the wealthy have a particular temptation to ignore mercy. The wealthy have a particular temptation to turn away. The wealthy have a particular temptation to justify holding on to more of their resources. So Jesus continually warns the wealthy, not you're awful people, you're in a very dangerous place.
You're right, because the indictment on the rich man was not his wealth. Jesus didn't say anything negative about the wealth that he had. He did paint the picture. This guy lives in luxury and lavish clothing, and this guy's very wealthy. There's no indictment for that. The indictment was he did nothing to help Lazarus at his gate. I mean, it was the turning away, and had the resources to do it. And then, of course, James later on just speaks very prophetically if you see a brother in need and refuse to help, or say be warmed and filled but do nothing to help, how can you say that the love of God is in you? I mean, it's super sobering. So I think my prayer is going to be, God, continue the work in my heart where it's become cold, where it's, because Jesus even talks about that, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. I certainly don't want it to be a heart of stone.
No,
because it's easy to get there.
It's easy to get there.
Well, Roger gets to pick the song for next week. I can't wait. I hope it's something I'm semi-familiar with.
Do you think we should do Jackson Brown's song next week?
I was thinking before you said, I was thinking that Jackson Brown song, The Rebel Jesus.
Yeah, The Rebel Jesus. Let's try that one.
Okay. I'm just gonna warn listeners, you're gonna have two very convicting podcasts in a row right here during the Christmas season. So yay, Pastords.
We'll blame Pink Floyd and Jackson Brown.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Hopefully we'll see you next week, you brave ones.
Unless Bruce forgets.